He is now famous and rich and settled, has a wife and child. He doesn't have to do what he does next. But here we run into his second title, the father of chemical warfare. You see, both the Allies and the Germans had been messing around with, I wouldn't even call them poisonous gases. I would call them irritant gases.
Like tear gas.
Yeah, like tear gas, like bromine. But even though these did tear up the eyes and irritate the lungs, you know what? They just didn't kill people. Certainly not in wide swaths and horrifying ways. And you know what? That just wasn't good enough for Fritz Haber. He really needed to just... Yeah, how do you torture 10,000 people at once, right? How does science give us that answer? And so he turned to a different gas. That would be chlorine gas, and later mustard gas, brought to you by this brilliant, unstoppable mind. And he does it, and he weaponizes it, and he unleashes it against, I believe, the French and some Belgians and some English at the Second Battle of Ypres, killing and torturing over 10,000 people, most of whom died by drowning in their own bodily fluids as their lungs burned and broke down. You died by drowning.
It was 5,000 dead the first night.
Those were the lucky ones.
10,000 who were maimed. They set off 168 tons in paint cans.
What?
All across the front. He actually had this whole team of scientist volunteers that he trained to handle the stuff, and they moved it in liquid form in paint cans, and would scoop out and bury it up to the lid all along the front, and then they went and waited until the wind was right, and then did the whole thing at once. 5,000 dead in a single night.
Oh. And I said, dead this is a horrifyingly painful death, taking hours, if not days or even weeks. Those that survived were often permanently disfigured. And he comes home to celebrate this massive success.
Because this was a fulfillment of a lifelong dream of his. When he was younger, he had tried to join the army and had been rejected
Too evil?
for being Jewish.
Oh.
Full circle. He was rejected from joining the army when he was younger for being Jewish. And a lot of this can be attributed to him wanting to prove that he's German enough to join the army. And it took him a long time to sell this idea of chemical warfare. The first general that he presented with the idea called it repulsive.
Yeah!
But now, this was a big win, right? This broke the Allied line. And so he was not only brought into the army, he was brought in as a captain. Captain Haber. This was his dreams come true. His friends threw this big party for him. And here comes the next part. Go ahead, Lance.
Okay, normally we let Mike take the really horrible, depressing stuff, but we decided that I would take this one. So, it is evening in the Haber household. There is a big party going on, celebrating his brutal victory over the Allies using chemical warfare to burn out their eyes, lungs, etc. His wife, Clara, right, we remember her, who was a fantastic mind in her own right, is so horrified by what he has done. By some accounts, she confronts him about it and says that she cannot live with this. We do not know what he told her, but we know what happens next. She gets his service revolver, because, right, he's in the army now, right? Big army captain. And she goes out in the garden and shoots herself in the chest. The only person to come to her aid is her young son, who finds his mother and holds her as she dies.
He's what, 12 years old? Something like that?
Somewhere around there. So that's the evening. Fritz Haber pretty much leaves him like that, and early in the morning, because you got to get a good start on this, he leaves to go orchestrate another attack against the Russians on the Eastern Front, leaving the funeral arrangements and his son or whatever to, I don't know, whoever wants to clean up that mess. Ladies and gentlemen, do you begin to understand why we hate this man? He is just so much the worst. And yet, in spite of that, he still wins the Nobel Prize in 1918, which is just staggering. I don't know exactly what happened there, but I guess, again, the impact, the legacy really is amazing. Right? We have a current population of well over 7 billion in this world. We could not do that without the Haber-Bosch process. That is the method to this day, how we pull nitrogen out of the air and give it to our hungry plants to feed our hungry population, right? We could not hold this population without what he did. And so I guess I get it. Okay, but he was such a monster. And we'll tell the end of the story here in just a bit, because there's a little bit more.
Oh boy. Okay, so
or would you like me to just take it to the end?
No, I can. I'll get the end. Over the course of the war, Germany inflicts some 700,000 casualties using chemical warfare. Untold numbers of civilians, obviously. Because of the chemical attacks, the Allies begin developing their chemical weapons, and they inflict about 600,000 back on Germany. In the end, about 1.3 million young men end up maimed or killed by chemical gas attacks in World War I. And that is pretty much exclusively on the shoulders of Fritz Haber. After the war, he has his Nobel Prize, which is lovely, but German politics take a bit of a turn in that it was hard being Jewish before. Things get even worse.
Let me bring up before that. So, just in case any of our viewers don't know this, Germany lost World War I and was forced to pay reparations, right? The Allies said that Germany had to pay for the war costs. Fritz Haber, first of all, takes on trying to pay these. He comes up with a method, or attempts to bring up a method. This is one of his rare failures, to extract gold from ocean water. That is his plan, is to pull gold from the ocean and pay off the reparations that way. That fails.
Yeah.
So instead he goes back to his strong suit of poisonous gases and develops a pesticide gas known as, I believe it's Zyklon A is what it was called.
Yeah.
And licenses that to a German chemical company to make pesticides to sell that and see if they couldn't make some money and help pay back the war debt. Anyways, we'll just stick a pin in that. Anyways, so things are getting worse and worse for Jews in Germany.
Yes. For those of you who aren't familiar with this extremely unfortunate chapter of German history, a new political party rises to power based on ultranationalism, and they make some new laws about how Jewish people are to be taxed. Remember, Haber was outrageously wealthy by, all the blood money and stuff. He was fabulously wealthy. But that all started to change. All of the smart Jewish people are fleeing the country. Everyone that can is fleeing the country as fast as they can. Haber will not, because then he'll have to give up even more of his money, and he doesn't want to do that, so he just hangs on for a little bit longer as they slowly whittle away at his fortune until eventually, left almost destitute, an old friend who had been estranged for some time reaches out and offers to help. They had been estranged because they fell on very different sides of the Manifesto of 93. His friend believed that using science for war and using the good that science can do, using your intellect for a nationalist agenda was despicable.
Said some very strong things about it.
Yes.
He was absolutely disgusted at the idea of using science for war.
But probably mostly out of mostly to honor Clara's legacy, Haber's old friend reaches out and arranges to get him and his surviving family out of Germany. That old friend was Albert Einstein.
Right?
Yay!
Who was not the worst.
Who is not the worst. He was actually a pretty okay dude.
Yeah, which means we won't be talking much about him, which is a shame. At least not tonight.
Nope, cameo's over.
All right, but yes, that they were. It was a tale of two geniuses. They were both essentially German Jews, brilliant, but they took incredibly divergent paths. So let's just get to the end of Haber here. So he actually flees to Britain, stays there for a little bit, is broken as a man, and ultimately just dies. And that's pretty much the end of Haber. I think he died 1938. And yes, died a broken man far from the country he sacrificed so much for. However, let's return to that little pin of Zyklon A, the pesticide that he created to help Germany pay its war reparations. That German company that he licensed it to or gave it to modifies it slightly to make Zyklon B, the official extermination gas of the Holocaust gas chambers. Also brought to you by Fritz Haber. So there is really no end to the absolute horror that this guy created, but also it is so confusing because his legacy is so overwhelmingly positive as far as he did feed the world. He was just trying to murder people in horrifying ways, but accidentally, saved everyone. So it's a really weird story. All right, any last thoughts on Fritz Haber? Because I think we should move on.
Burn in hell, buddy.
Yeah.
That's...
Thank you so much. And
so much. And, eternal damnation to your soul.